Hey everybody, welcome to the Blue Chip Podcast by fans for fans. This is your host Cody Potter. How we doing? We got a little bit of news. We know Gannon's coming in to interview for the DC position on Thursday. Tonight is Wednesday. We got confirmation from Ian Rappaport that Brian Flores is going to interview for the DC job today. This will be a lateral move, man. This kind of signifies quite a few different things, man. Put a little video on here just to give you something else to look at. But Brian Flores, man, this is a very well regarded defensive coordinator in this league, man. This dude's just rock solid. He's as good as they come, man. He brings a ton of pressure, lots of blitzes, things like that, man. For this guy to move laterally, I know he's got some head coaching interviews and things like that, and I think it's well deserved. You can say whatever about the lawsuit against the NFL from his time in Miami for, not wanting to tank and things like that, and then getting fired and all these things. He's definitely a head coach worthy coach in this league. For him to leave Minnesota to come here, having a top 5 defense, to come to the 32nd ranked defense in Washington, man, I think that would signify quite a few things, man. One, it would be money. I mean, you're going to be, it would mean ownership opening up their pockets, basically paying head coach money to a defensive coordinator, also working under a defensive coach in Dan Quinn, which I think could be beneficial for both. There's a lot of things that go into that. Moving laterally is not something that I would expect him to do, but I mean, if you get a chance to get this type of guy on your staff, it's second to none. I mean, realistically, I think it's pretty wild already. I kind of brought this up about the David Blau hiring or promotion for the offensive coordinator position. He's going to be a first-time offensive coordinator, first-time calling plays. He had an interview with the Lions where he had already previously stopped and worked there. So he already had a relationship with Dan Campbell, another coach that I really, really respect. For him to come back to be Jaden Daniels' offensive coordinator, man, I thought that signified something because we all know what Detroit has on the offense, man. I mean, we knew Washington with Terry McLaurin and Jaden Daniels the rookie year. We all know what that season looked like. I think the biggest thing is, there's 8-9 head coaching openings in this league right now. It's very seldom do you see the offensive and defensive coaches that get fired off a staff get turned over this quickly. Usually you see the head coaching hires and things like that go on before you see the coordinator roles start to get filled because coaches move. They start to bring their own coaches in. It leaves other coordinator vacancies. Usually these things get handled a little bit later in the offseason. I think it's really awesome that the Commanders are, they're pretty much putting their foot down. They're going after Blau. They're bringing in Flores for an interview. They're bringing in Gannon for an interview. Both of these guys have head coaching acumen. Both of these guys are very, very well-respected coordinators in this league. Both of them will probably have another shot to be head coaches in this league. So I just think to bring Flores in for this interview, man, I think that speaks volumes just to the relationship he already has working with Adam Peters in New England. Both of them guys were young, up-and-coming, aspiring guys at that time. Both of them have already, earned a pretty well reputation for the things that they've done in their stops previous to where they are now, leading up to where they are now. It would be a really, really cool hire if that was to happen. I mean, Flores brings a ton of pressure. He gets very, very creative on the back end, makes it very, very complicated for quarterbacks to get comfortable, and that's the type of defense that you want, man. That's what you want. That's what this team needs. I like Gannon as well. I'd be elated with either of them. Do I think we actually hire Flores? No, but I mean, if we did, I'd be jumping through the moon because I mean that's just the type of coordinator that you want. That's the type of attitude that you want. Long term, is he going to stay here? Things like that. I don't know. I mean, he turns his defense around in 1 year. We have success and Jaden Daniels stays healthy and plays up to his capabilities on offense because Blau gets that offense working better and they start using some more traditional sets. Adam Peters is going to go into this offseason. I mean, we've talked about it on many pods. He's going to go into this offseason. He's going to prioritize the defense and things like that. I think it's going to be really, really telling. If we were to make a hire like this, I think it would be very, very telling that Flores would have a lot of say in the type of players that we're going to bring in, whether it's through the draft, through free agency, things like that. There's players that we're going to talk about and how they would fill in their roles. a little bit later as to Brian Flores and how that would fit with, working with Dan Quinn. I think would be something very, very beneficial to Brian Flores. We all know the fire that he has, the competitiveness, the chip, the edge. He's a young guy. He's trying to work his way up in the league. He's proven that he's very, very good. He should already have a head coaching role if it wasn't for the lawsuit and things like that, in my opinion. But there's a lot of things that he could learn from Dan Quinn, the human. There's a lot of things that Dan Quinn could learn from Flores too. I think Dan Quinn learned a lot from his first year here in Washington, being able to allocate both the time and the assets to in-game. Not having to call the plays, not having to be on top of the coordinator, letting the coordinators do their job and being pretty much isolated to just the head coaching responsibilities, which, challenges timeouts, clock management, things like that. Having his input and being in the headset and, listening to what they're doing, but giving them the free reign to do their thing. I think Dan Quinn, after this year, taking over the play calling responsibilities for Joe Witt, at a certain point in the season when it was just time, it had to be done. I think he realizes that he wants the defense to be handled by a coordinator. He wants the offense to be handled by a coordinator. So again, I think there's a lot of benefit for Dan Quinn having this type of guy. And like I said, Dan Quinn's the type of guy that wants to learn from, other coaches too. He wants all the feedback and all that, things like that. This would be another relationship that he'd be able to develop and things like that moving forward. So again, I think it would be very, very useful for him and the staff. This is just one player and this is one idea. This is one scenario for Brian Flores. But if you're bringing in Brian Flores, man, he's not going to just sit by and let us keep picking offensive players in the first round. We picked Jaden Daniels. We picked Josh Connerly Jr. We put a lot of assets that are going to go from this draft into Laramie Tunsil. So again, man, you're going defense early. Caleb Downs, Arvell Reese, guys like that. It's going to be very prevalent that that's the direction that this team is going to be going into, this offseason. It's going to be defensive based. And like I said, that's going to be through free agency. That's going to be through, that's going to be through the draft and all that thing. That's why I'm talking about Caleb Downs here. I think Caleb Downs is a very, very special player. I think Caleb Downs is going to be the best player on the board when it comes down to it in the draft, if he's available. And I think the biggest thing for that is going to be I think, like I said, the biggest thing I think going forward with a Caleb Downs or whatever in the draft, I think that the flexibility that it gives you on the back end. We know that, Flores wants to create pressure up front. We need help on the edges, but we do have Deron Payne. We do have Javon Kinlaw. We have seen that, Jerzon Newton, who was a high priority pick, he's essentially a first rounder, 36 pick in the draft. I mean, that's basically a first round player. And in that loaded draft class, which had a lot more first round grades on it than this class currently does right here, that at least from what I'm grading, that's a value pick that you really, you could have traded down. You could have received more assets in the future for that pick. They prioritized Jerzon Newton, so they want him to be attacking the quarterback. That is his best attribute, and we kind of saw that for the first time against in the Dallas game. We need to see a lot more of it, but is Brian Flores the type of guy that can maximize that type of pick? Is he the type of guy that can get the most out of a Jerzon Newton and Deron Payne and things like that? Who I think Deron Payne has, the ability to be an elite level player. He just hasn't gotten there yet. He's had a couple seasons where, it was contract year and things like that, and he was producing it this year at a really, really high clip. And it was very, very effective on this defense, but the back end struggled. You've bring in a Josh Downs type who is the ultimate eraser, whether it's the tight end position, running backs out of the backfield. He's a really good tackler. He's rock solid in coverage. He's had Harrison Smith over there at the Vikings and things like that, playing that type of role. I think, Caleb Downs, that is the type of player that would fit really in that defense and in that mold. And there's a lot of players that are going to fit the type of, that type of defensive fit in that mold. I mean, there's no shortage of them in college football, especially coming out this year, especially on the defensive side. Caleb Downs is a unicorn type prospect for me, but that kind of leads me to this player right here. And it's not just because I'm a Miami University fan. It's because Ruben Bain Jr. is the type of attitude that I think, a Brian Flores would really, really thrive with and really get the best out of. Ruben Bain Jr. is not the biggest highway speed guy. He's got a little bit of measurable issue and things like that. But when I think about what Ruben Bain Jr. does do. He is the toughest guy on the field. He is the strongest guy on the field. I mean, we've seen him be double teamed and things like that and hold the line, in the run game, make tackles for loss. I mean, the dude's a freak, and he has pass rushing ability. Him and Akeem Masador complement each other really, really well, and I feel like we have some speed on the edge already here. It's not somebody that you're going to, it's not a Ruben Bain Jr. type level player, but Dorrance Armstrong has some speed off the edge. You have Javonte Jean-Baptiste, who has all the measurables, the Jacob Martins, and the guys that have, shown in their roles that they can step up and they can give you that little speed rush off the edge. I think this guy is a do-it-all defender on the edge, and I think he sets his side very, very well. And you cannot, you can run away from him, but you can also key your linebackers and things like that to be able to, set up for a team that wants to prioritize running away from this guy. I think Ruben Bain Jr. would be a hell of a player that would be an amazing addition for this team. You could think David Bailey or anything like that as well. David Bailey has more of the height, weight, speed that you're looking for, the explosive, first step. David Bailey's he's rock solid. If you can't go wrong with really either of these guys if that's going to be the edge player that you go with. But again, highly, focus on the defensive additions in this draft. I talked on my last episode about a couple free agents that I'm really, really interested. Those are like key guys for me. That doesn't mean there's not other guys. I mean, there are. I mean, there's linebackers across the league. There's safeties across the league that are really, really worthy of, spending some money at. The options are all on the table. It's about getting the guy to sign a contract in free agency. There's a lot of things that go into that, and I'll have a lot more episodes on that. But like I said, I mean, if Flores is going to come here, you're pretty much assured that you're going on the defensive side of the ball. The strength of this draft is on the defensive side of the ball. It's also on the offensive side of the ball in the trenches. And then you have some really, really, really good running backs in this draft. I do like the wide receiver class as well. I don't think it's nothing like next year's. I'd prefer to use a top pick next year in the draft for a wide receiver. I mean, I do like Mekhi Lemon. I think he's a stud. I think, Carnell Tate's a stud. But again, if you're bringing up Flores ain't coming in here to be ranked 31st in defense next year. If he's going to take that type of money and you're going to give him that type of money, you're going to have to give him the assets, and the assets are going to come from the draft. And when you have the number 7 overall pick, you're pretty much guaranteed to go that direction in the draft. And like I said, I highlighted these two players just because simply I think they are two of the best fits for what he likes to do, specifically through his defenses, through his looks. I think Mikey Samerstill, he would get the most out of him. A nickel player with some attitude, really, really good nickel cornerback, can play outside. I think Trey Amos would really flourish in that type of defense. That's honestly his best skill set, is the defense that, the way that Brian Flores Jr. uses his coverage in zone and in man. The best looks that Amos had as a pro and the best looks that he had at Ole Miss and things like that in his time at Alabama, those were his best looks, is the way that Brian Flores deplores his cornerbacks. Similar with Mikey Samerstill and things like that. When Mikey Samerstill is playing outside, he's very similar to Trey Amos, just without the height and the weight and the speed. But he's feisty in his own right, and that's what I'm saying. I mean, it all comes down to that. I wanted to put a quick little episode out about Brian Flores Jr. or Brian Flores, the interview and things like that, and what it means for this team. I think it would be a really, really big step in the right direction. And just, I mean, I think it would say a lot. I mean, last year, this team, we definitely had injuries. I mean, we aren't the team that, we saw in 2024 where we were in the NFC Championship game. And I mean, there were a lot of things that led up to that, and injuries and all these things, but none of them were real. They're, you can use excuses if you want, but simply the production wasn't there. Simply, there were times where effort wasn't there. It's really, really hard when you're getting your ass kicked every week, by 20, 30 points. I mean, we had some blowout losses in this season. Of course, every week there was injury. But again, that's more excuses and things like that. You got to find a way for your team to stay healthy. Players got to understand how to take care of their bodies to stay healthy, and hopefully next year, I think the fact that we're filling these coordinator roles or even getting these interviews this quickly, trying to get these things out of the way, I think this is something that AP has really learned from, whether it was the coaching hire for Dan Quinn, where he missed out on, McDaniel because McDaniel went to Seattle. We wanted to interview Ben Johnson and things like that. I think McDonald would have been a really, really good hire. I think McDonald was really high on the list, and I think McDonald probably was their number 2 choice behind Ben Johnson. But you're waiting for Ben Johnson for the playoffs, and McDonald goes to Seattle because they weren't going to let him out of the building. Ultimately, Ben Johnson wanted to return to Detroit. Now you're left with Dan Quinn, who I like Dan Quinn. I'm not anything against Dan Quinn, but what I'm saying is this waiting, it costs you. I think that's something that we're seeing with AP and the staff is they're not waiting around. Hiring David Blau, getting him in, having that familiarity with Jaden Daniels, taking the risk on having him, be a first-time play caller. It is a risk, and I think that's something Dan Quinn is like, well, we're going to make it happen, man. We're going to work with him and get all these things. But making Jaden Daniels the most comfortable that they could, I thought they think that he has the acumen to make that decision. Bringing in somebody that he's not too familiar with in Brian Flores, getting this relationship, getting this interview, getting in contact with him and having that interview, it's just another step in the right direction. It's showing that they're not messing around. They're not waiting for everything and all the chips to fall around them and then they get whatever's left. They're really, really going at this and attacking, and I respect the ownership for that. I think that says that we are on a different path than where we have been in the future, in the past with Dan Snyder and things like that. And I think it speaks to the quarterback. Guys want to work with Dan Quinn. He's always had a respectable staff. I think he's going to have a respectable staff by the time this is all said and done. I think this is him taking himself out of his comfort zone again, which I think speaks to him as a human and as a coach. I like I said, man, filling these roles quickly, not letting them linger. I think after you get the defensive coordinator in, allow him to make his hires, allow Blau to make his hires. I think the next thing you turn your attention to is Laramie Tunsil, and we'll talk about that soon. Getting him under contract so you can get into free agency unscathed. You know what your cap numbers are, who you're focused on, and you're just going to go into free agency. You're going to try to get your guys in here. You're going to move from guy to guy to guy, and you're not going to take no time. It's like, hey, this is the deal is going to be. Feel around what you got, but we're not coming back to this. So you're either going to call us on the next call and accept the deal, go under contract, and that's what it's going to be, or we're moving to the next. And I think that's how this offseason is going to go. I think it's going to be very, very fast-paced. I think they're going to go after their guys that they have identified that they want. They're going to throw the offer out there that they're willing to give, and that's what it's going to be. And if they sign on the dotted lines, that's how it's going to go, or it's on to the next. I think it's going to be a very, very, abrupt offseason. I think they're going to be very, very dialed into what they want to make happen, and I think they're going to put the assets in the place to make these moves happen. You're seeing it right now with the coordinator hires and things like that. So we should all be kind of excited to see what comes of this in the next 24, 48 hours, maybe even the next Monday or something like that. But I would expect the coordinator position to be filled up pretty quickly the way that they've been moving this offseason, and then let them fill out their staffs outside of that. So again, man, I appreciate you guys checking out the Blue Chip Podcast, man. I just wanted to get this out to you guys. Pretty exciting news. The fact that we're even talking about making these hires before head coaches have even signed, I think it's pretty exciting, man. It's something that we haven't really seen here in a long time. So it sucks that we had this offseason, but I think the lessons that we've learned over the last 2 years, year 3 is the year that you really expect to take a jump. So, and it's really nice to see them prioritizing these moves, getting respectable guys in here and making respectable offers to them. So again, Brian Flores wouldn't have came here if that wasn't the point. So again, man, I appreciate you guys checking out the Blue Chip Podcast, man. I'll have more coming to you soon. It's going to be a busy offseason. I'm going to have a lot coming at you as far as draft, free agency, and things like that. So keep checking us out. I appreciate everything. Peace.